you're sitting in this room getting clearly what had been prior Gang of Eight level classified information, didn't somebody raise their hand and say, well, holy crap, where are the Democrats?
Hey, welcome back to the show where we look to keep everybody balanced on everything that's happening, not only in the United States, but around the world. Now, for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, remember how the show works. We look to give you a balanced perspective on everything that's happening around the world so that we're all more informed on what's going on around us. So let's go ahead and start with the first topic of the day, which is Venezuela. There's a lot going on around Venezuela right now. President Trump has now said that ground attacks on Venezuelan soil are a true possibility. However, when asked about it, he stated that they weren't. But before we get to that, let's first talk about María Machado, who's the opposition leader, and listen to how she explains exactly why we need to do something about Venezuela, and listen to the threat that is brewing within Venezuela and the safe haven it is for people who seek to do us harm here in the United States of America.
Look, Michelle, as I was saying, for years, we were, asking the world to understand the degree of the threat and this devastation the Maduro regime was building in Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela has been turned into the safe haven for the activities of all criminal international networks, from the drug cartels to the Colombian guerrilla, to those groups that smuggle gold and destroy communities of our indigenous people and the ecology, to networks that smuggle arms and even human trafficking and child prostitution. This is horrible, what we're living. Russian agents, Iranian agents freely operating in Venezuela, Hezbollah and Hamas being located in our country. And as any criminal structure works, the moment you start weakening them and they falling apart is when you cut the sources of their and the inflows of their criminal activities. And we have asked for years the international community to cut these sources that come from drug trafficking and other criminal activities. Finally, this is happening.
I think talking about Venezuela is very important for us here in the United States of America. And I know there are a lot of people that are saying, well, what do we have to do with any of that? Besides the narco trafficking that's happening in Venezuela, there's still a lot of other things that are happening that have a direct impact on us here in the United States. So we're talking about Hezbollah, we're talking about transnational criminal organizations that engage in child prostitution, child trafficking, drug trafficking, and all types of other illicit activities. The opposition leader has asked for help, and the Trump administration has delivered. I know there's a lot of talk as well as to why Venezuela doesn't just deal with this issue by themselves. Well, they've tried several times through fair, democratic elections that always get overturned. Listen to her address some of those issues right now.
Michelle, I ask you to understand what we, the Venezuelan people, have done. We've got over 35 rigged elections. We finally demonstrated we won, and then we were attacked. We've gone through 17 episodes of dialogue. In every single one, Maduro has committed to certain actions, and then he has violated the agreement. And also we've had hundreds, thousands of protests, peaceful rallies, demonstrations. And every single time that happens, we are fired. So we've come and gone through every single institutional means.
And when she's talking about being fired, she's actually talking about the military firing against those who oppose the Maduro regime. So let me take this opportunity to address the militaries in Latin America. First of all, militaries in Latin America engage in security operations all the time. It's not like in the United States where we have a great deal of opposition against utilizing the military for ground operations within the country, whether that's for crime prevention. And as we know, the president recently used the National Guard in Washington, D.C. to reduce crime, and it was very effective. However, we also know that there's a lot of opposition to utilizing the same tactics anywhere else in any other state. And obviously, there are constitutional restrictions on his application of military force here in the United States. But in Latin America, that is not the case. The military is an essential part to public security, to public stability. And I'll say that as a person who specialized in Latin America for the United States. As a matter of fact, I helped develop a bunch of different tactics, techniques, procedures, doctrine for some of these Latin American countries so they can utilize the military in a more effective manner. And let me tell you, it actually worked in Latin America. However, that doesn't mean that the status quo needs to be maintained in Latin America as far as utilizing the militaries the way that they're being utilized right now. There are a lot of countries in Latin America where some of the military personnel hold more authority than some of the members in Congress, some of the senators. And that's unfortunate. And that goes back a very long time. I think a way that Latin American countries can do away with the nepotism, the cronyism, the corruption that's deeply embedded in these governments is by getting rid of these militaries. And I know that's going to be very difficult to do, but I think if you need a model country to look at, all we need to do is take a look at Costa Rica. In 1948, Costa Rica completely did away with their military, and they moved to establish La Fuerza Pública, or the public force, that works really well. I think Latin America needs to move to a system where there is a clear separation between the military and the government. And if you are anywhere in Latin America, or you live in Latin America, or you are from there, you will be quick to realize that that separation between the military and the government does not exist. But I think if we want to move into a more stable Latin America, that separation needs to be clear and it needs to be concise. So let's talk about what I discussed in the beginning, whether President Trump was considering strikes on Venezuela or he was not. Listen to this video where he actually denies it.
Mr. President, there are reports that you are considering strikes within Venezuela. Is that true?
No.
That you made a decision on that?
No, it's not true.
Mr. President.
You know, President Trump is denying it, but I don't think that's the case. I think they are considering land strikes in Venezuela. Now, you know, I could tell you from my experience that we always have operational plans to strike pretty much every country in the world. And I think we have those plans in place. Now, whether he decides to do it, that's going to be, you know, up in the air, and we'll see what actually happens. But we all know there is an increased posture around Venezuela with all the weapons and all the ships and everything else that's there and prepositioned to take military action. But for right now, I think what President Trump is doing is posturing. He's trying to force Maduro to take action, and that action is to leave government. The truth of the matter is that Venezuela stands absolutely no chance against the United States of America and their military. So I think Maduro's best choice is to take all the money that he's put into his bank, that he's stolen from the Venezuelan people, and go somewhere else. But I think none of us should be confused by Trump's first initial statement that it was a possibility to strike Venezuela, and then now him saying that, you know, striking Venezuela is not something that he's looking at. I think we need to look a little bit beyond just his statements and what he's saying. President Trump's most effective card when it comes to his military strategies is the unknown. Listen to General Wesley Clark talk about that here in this clip.
I think it's like jiggling the skeleton key in the lock. It doesn't always engage the first time you move it back and forth and play with it a little bit. So you've got military force. So the rumors are that there are some special operators inside Venezuela. You're not quite sure what the target is. That's Maduro's problem. Is it him? Could he just suddenly disavow Russia, Iran, and China and say, no, I don't want them. I'm on your side, America? Could he suddenly say, I'm going to crack down on all? Could he say, I'm just going to accept the results of the next election, and I mean it this time? He doesn't know what the objective is, so he's under a lot of pressure. And I think this is part of the strategy. We don't know what the objective really is.
I think the unknowns are the strategy. I think Maduro not knowing exactly what President Trump is going to do or is willing to do is the strategy. And I think it's a brilliant one. The only known is that there is a large military presence to include B-1 bombers. There are F-35s. There are Reapers. There are MQ-9s. There are a lot of Marines that are capable of taking him down in a heartbeat. That's what Maduro knows. And the number of unknowns are unlimited. He doesn't know what the heck President Trump is considering. Is it land strikes? Is it ground forces? Is it providing weapons to the opposition? All of these unknowns are the strategy. Like I've told you guys before, we look at everything from a balanced perspective, right? I think the Republicans are doing a terrible job when it comes to briefing Congress. And I'll talk about the War Powers Act here in a second, but first listen to the frustration by some of these congressmen on the briefs that they received or lack thereof from the president and his administration.
There were not very good answers as to, what is the standard, what is occurring. Lawyers were supposed to be in the room. They were not. People were very frustrated in the information that was being provided.
Am I leaving satisfied? Absolutely not. They just said that they can't answer these questions because the lawyers aren't here. They canceled having the lawyers here.
Are you hearing from the right people?
I don't know. I don't think so.
If you're sitting in this room getting clearly what had been prior Gang of Eight level classified information, didn't somebody raise their hand and say, well, holy crap, where are the Democrats? Who was willing to say, isn't there a constitutional obligation here? It is about separation of powers. For the folks who wave their Constitution around, read the damn thing and then explain why you would sit through that briefing and not call foul.
Look, like I've told you before, the president doesn't need authority from Congress to strike targets in Venezuela. So let's talk about how he can legally do that. And to do that, we first need to discuss the War Powers Resolution, or the War Powers Act, as it's commonly called. So there are three viable reasons why the president can utilize the War Powers Act. The first is if the United States is attacked or faces an imminent threat. The second is to repel an attack against the United States itself, its territories, its allies, or its military forces. The third is when there's an emergency that requires immediate action to protect U.S. interests. Now, if the president does decide to utilize the War Powers Act under any of those three, he must first notify Congress within 48 hours of any such action. There's a 60-day window where the president can engage in these actions. There's another 30-day window where he has to withdraw those forces, unless Congress authorizes continued military involvement. Look, President Trump has clearly stated that this country is absolutely under attack because of all the drugs that are flowing in from Venezuela and other places. So I think he's going to continue striking those drug boats that are coming out of Venezuela, and he's only going to intensify the pressure on the narco-terrorists that exist within Venezuela and Colombia. So let's go ahead and shift to the next topic, which is the government shutdown, which has lasted way too long. And we are now at a point where Americans are really starting to feel the pain. The parties are continuing to bicker while Americans suffer. They continue to just put out absolute lies about everything that's going on. One party says something, the other says the complete opposite. So let's take a look at what's actually happening. The Democrats continue to say that they want the ACA subsidies extended, and it's about health care for Americans. We're talking about a 70% increase in some places on premiums with people's health care. But is that really what they're asking for? Are they only asking for an extension on the ACA subsidies? That is not what they're asking for. Listen to Congressman Emmer talk about that.
So, Congressman, governance is almost always, about compromise. If you're not going to get those Democrats in the situation as we currently have it, how about a compromise? What is an olive branch you, as the Republicans, could offer the Democrats? They're really concerned about healthcare subsidies. How about you put in writing, rather than just saying, we'll talk about it, we guarantee we'll talk about it? How about some sort of resolution that would guarantee that? Would that move things forward? Is that a good idea?
Jonathan, first, I understand their talking point is they're all about these enhanced Obamacare health care premium subsidies. But if you look at what they filed in writing as an alternative bill in the Senate, Jonathan, it's over 60 pages long. About a page and a half has to do with the enhanced premium tax credits for Obamacare. It's complete nonsense when they claim that. They want $1.5 trillion in new spending. They want to put illegals back on government taxpayer-funded health care, and they want to gut the $50 billion rural health care fund that Republicans and Donald J. Trump just created last July. This is not about health care. This is about trying to take a knee to their virulent, violent, left-wing radicals.
Let's take a listen at a little bit more.
I'm a lead co-sponsor on a bill to extend the ACA subsidy by a year. I went and asked Hakeem Jeffries 3 weeks ago, sign on to the bill. If this is what you're saying is the issue, let's get it done, sign on to the bill and join me. He said no, because it really was never about that. So if we want to address health care in America, let's do it. But you don't do it in a shutdown.
You know, they talk a lot about these subsidies, but what exactly are the details regarding these subsidies? Why are they expiring now? Why weren't they made permanent? That's a great question for all of us to consider, right? So the expanded ACA subsidies were passed in 2021 through the American Rescue Plan. They were passed right after COVID to stimulate the economy, and the subsidies were later extended through the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. And why didn't Democrats do something back then? That's the true question, because the Democrats at that point held the House, they held the Senate, and they held the presidency, but they chose not to make these permanent or extend them beyond 2025. So the Democrats can continue to say that it's about the ACA subsidies being extended, but in reality, it's not. They have a lot more that they're asking for, and unfortunately, the American people are going to continue to suffer until both parties can come to an agreement. So let's move on to our next topic of the day, which is President Trump has decided to test nuclear weapons, or has he? There are a lot of people spazzing out right now about President Trump's statement where he noted that he's considering testing nuclear weapons, but some of those critics are validating the reason we need to test nuclear weapons, or not even nuclear weapons, just the vehicles that deliver these nuclear weapons. Listen to this.
Because there are no facilities, there's no testing equipment, there's no expertise, there are no people. This will cost hundreds of millions of dollars and quite frankly, years to be able to do it. It's not just like, well, let's go ahead and set off a nuke. That is not how this works. And the American people have to understand and have full confidence that our nuclear weapons are safe and that they will operate as needed when they are needed. So this is just a ruse by the president.
Listen, we haven't tested nuclear weapons in a very long time. Other countries haven't either. And I think that's a great way to deter the use of nuclear weapons. But the fact of the matter is, how can it be that us, as the United States of America, don't have the expertise, the know-how, the assets that we need in order to validate that our weapons are up to date? How does that even work? How is that possible? Because that's what he just said. He just said that we don't have the expertise, the know-how, or the assets to truly test these nuclear weapons. I'm not advocating for the testing of nuclear weapons, but how can we not have the people to do it if we do decide to do it? Now, just to be clear, I don't think President Trump was saying that he was going to test nuclear weapons. That's very expensive. That takes years to do, because in his statement, he stated that other countries are doing it as well, but China and Russia haven't been doing it. What they were doing was testing the delivery systems for the nuclear weapons, not the nuclear weapons themselves. And I think that's a very important distinction. So listen to his clarifying comments regarding that same fact.
Are you talking about literally resuming underground nuclear detonation tests?
You'll find out very soon, but we're going to do some testing. Yeah, other countries do it. If they're going to do it, we're going to do it.
Okay, you can't clarify whether you'll resume.
I'm not going to say yet. I mean, I know exactly what we're doing, where we're doing it, but other countries are doing it.
But I think the left is starting to realize, or at least the left-leaning media is starting to realize what President Trump's strategy actually is. Listen to CNN talk about his strategy.
Maybe it's as simple as being just unpredictable. Maybe that's a weapon for him. Maybe it's just as simple. That's always the excuse. Create the chaos and see what happens next.
As I mentioned previously when we were discussing Venezuela, I think President Trump's unpredictability is indeed a weapon because it keeps other countries in check, whether it's tariffs, sanctions, or positioning a full amphibious ready group at your doorstep. President Trump is absolutely unpredictable, and that keeps a lot of countries in check. That same panel on CNN expressed what they really thought about President Trump and nuclear weapons, and that's that he wants a nuclear-free world. Listen to this.
He's also, it should be noted, has said several times in the past, and I actually believe him when he says this, that he would love to see a nuclear-free world. Ronald Reagan used to say the same things in the 1980s. Democrats mocked him, but we've come to understand that actually was something that he genuinely believed in. I think Trump has that idea first, but it is in sort of in incoherent tension with the way that he is approaching the world.
Yeah. Listen, I think we're behind when it comes to technology and China in our weapons delivery systems. And I think Russia is catching up very quickly. We need to stay the course if we want to intercept these type of weapons from striking us on the motherland. So I think when it comes to weapons development, I think the United States needs to pick it up. We need to remain the single hegemon, the single superpower, and continue to have the most devastating military in the world. If we don't do that, there's going to be instability all over the globe. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I try to keep it as balanced as possible. Make sure you guys subscribe and hit that notification button so I can keep you informed on what's going on, not only in the United States, but around the world. Everything that affects us is what I try to cover for you guys. So hopefully I'm doing a good job. Until next time, stay balanced.